A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? That I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I'm sitting on a new one right now. I'm the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from FlexiSpot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under-desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button, and it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from FlexiSpot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of FlexiSpot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of FlexiSpot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings. Helps if I put us in the show.
Yeah, well, hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Overthrows, episode number 3. I'm Behram Qazi, who you can find at deafmango on Twitter. And with me, as always, is Jared Kimber, who this time forgot to put us in the show.
Do you honestly want to know what I was doing?
What were you doing?
I was using artificial intelligence to try and make old sci-fi novel covers that look like cricket.
Yeah, totally believable. Those AI images that you keep sending.
There's like I've been trying to get giant flies over the top of futuristic cricket grounds to work. I've got some okay ones. I'm not sure if I've nailed it yet, but I'm on my way.
Well, I mean, we'll look forward to seeing all of those in your several pieces. But anyway, lots to talk about today. We've got QTW, Arko, Mookie, Hitesh Sinha, and Triple Shezwan Fried Rice in the comments. So hello to you guys as well. And as you know, Overthrows is all the on-field cricket stuff. So we'll start off with the Under-19 World Cup. Jared, Australia have won their 4th ICC title in a row. They defeated India in the final once again. That's 3 times in a row now. And I mean, it's been a golden year for Australia. Were you able to catch any of the action in this Under-19 World Cup?
No. Do you know what? I watched some of the smaller teams at the time. I think I saw a little bit of Bangladesh, Ireland, maybe Scotland as well at various times. But no, I always think, this is the year I'm going to watch the Under-19 World Cup. Then it starts and I realize it is absolutely not the year that I'm going to do that. I might have a look in the future, in the next couple of weeks. Or actually, I don't know when. I might look after the next actual World Cup when I get time off again. But I didn't see it. Take me through it. Is there anything I need to know other than Australia won? Well, and I had a guy called Beardman, which I do think is important.
Yeah. Initially, I thought that was Bradman, and I was like, we finally have another Bradman in Australia. But no, it was Beardman. But yeah, we had 2 very close semi-finals, right? South Africa, the home team, they set up like 240-odd for India to chase in the first semi. Then they had them at 32 for 4, and then India chased that down. And then Pakistan and Australia gave us a throwback semi-final where Pakistan made 179 and nearly defended 180 runs.
I did see that game, actually.
They won by 1 wicket.
I've now forgotten which games I saw. I did see that game. I put a tweet up about that game, making fun of 90s kids who always try to claim everything for themselves. Basically saying that how dare these young children, play in the style of 1990s ODI cricket. And there were some young people who took it really seriously. I'm like, guys, come on. This is a joke about what happened. But yeah, that was a good tense game. I saw a little bit of the first innings, but I saw most of the second innings. It was just full on the whole way. It's like an arm wrestle.
Yeah, it's crazy how Pakistan literally played like Pakistan from the 90s because they did not concede 200 even once in this entire tournament. They defended 155 versus Bangladesh, and their star performer was Ubaid Shah with the ball. Naseem's younger brother, right arm pacer, and he took 18 wickets at I think 12 and a half apiece. So he pretty much carried the team to the semis, and then ultimately that lack of batting lack of runs, really, because there is some talent over there, but they didn't get many runs. That caught up to them. But India, I think their batters were mighty impressive, right? You speak of that semi-final in which they chased that target down versus South Africa after being 32 for 4. So Uday Saharan, the captain, he played a very good knock, and he's also the leading run scorer of the tournament. And then Sachin Das, he scored around 96 runs in that game. Very, very impressive knock. He also ended up in the top 5 run scorers of the tournament. And coming in at 4 for 32 in a crunch game, then, leading your team home. Not to mention, of course, you've got Mushir Khan over there, who's Sarfaraz Khan's younger brother, second highest scorer in the tournament. Kind of fell off during the knockouts. But, that pipeline of batting talent, it seems to be flourishing as always.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw India play. So I'll take your word for it. It was funny. Someone contacted me at one stage to say, "I've got a story for you. A couple of the players in this tournament are actually over the age of 19." And I almost responded, "I've got a story for you. It's the fact that we can't actually accurately tell how old a person is. There is no medical test that allows for that. So I just assume every under-19 tournament is like this, and I just don't care all that much. I mean, individual players are quite interesting, but I remember doing a story years ago, and I think it might have been Alistair Cook's under-19 World Cup, and like third or fourth leading run scorer was a guy called Theo Doropoulos, who's now I want to say a news, but he might even be a weather presenter in Adelaide. I'm just saying, not everyone who makes a lot of runs at under-19 World Cup goes on to be, shout out to Theo. He did play first class cricket and everything. He wasn't a complete failure. But I think the player of the series a few years ago for Australia was Will Pasito. Do you know who Will Pasito is? Do you know what I mean?
Back then, he was all the rage.
That's what I mean. Unmukt
Chand is another, right? Now will be playing for the States, and he's looking forward to playing India actually in the T20 World Cup.
Yeah, Unmukt Chand, and there's another, so there's, I remember very, very early on, and they might have even won as well. Australia might have won an under-19 World Cup with a guy called Adam Smith, was captain of the team, Victorian player. A couple of years later, he was playing against me in club cricket. Like, these things happen. I'm not saying it's not worth watching. If it happened more often, I might be more interested in it, from a perspective point of view. But you see these guys every 4 years. And a lot of junior cricket, of course, is the way that you develop as a young player may not be the way that you develop as an adult. And people might not have worked you out yet and everything else. But, if you like it, it's certainly something to watch. I think it's great that it's broadcast. We've got a women's under-19 tournament. It was the last edition was the first one I think they'd ever play. Or the first edition was the first edition they ever played. These are great things, but I'd kind of prefer to see something. I would love it if Australia, India, and England actually use their money, towards actually setting up some kind of a junior league. We've seen it with A cricket at times as well. That I'd be more interested in, but a one-off tournament every now and again, it's going to depend on how busy I am that week. And glad it happened. Well done to all the cricketers involved, but I've got nothing for you, man. I'm sorry. Nothing.
I mean, you also got one thing wrong. You said every 4 years, where this one happens every 2 years. So we can see, Jared, how much
it's funny, when I said it, I was like, actually, is it every 2 years? And then I was like, I don't care. I lost interest midway through my sentence.
I'll tell you, on the batting front, I'm not too sure how many of these kids will really make it, because sure, India has all of this batting talent, but India already has a lot of batting talent. So will they be able to push through? We don't know. But I'll tell you some bowlers that I was really impressed with. I've already mentioned Ubaid Shah. I expect him to, like his brother Naseem, someday make it to Pakistan's team. He has another brother.
Too old to play for Pakistan already.
Who knows? 18, yeah, of course. Pakistan. You got to play them at 16, Pakistan.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no point. But yeah, there's him. India had this left arm orthodox spinner, Shomi Pandey. He took 18 wickets as well, like Ubaid, but his economy was 2.5. So there's something to look out for over there, right? Of course, there were the right arm paces from Australia, Callum Weidler and Tom Straker, who impressed. And there's an England leg spinner. He's actually a Birmingham kid from Warwickshire. Atif Nawaz from the BBC rates him very highly. His name is Tazim Ali, has a killer wrong un. But the one standout bowler, and if you have not...
Just before you go away from him, is he related to Moeen Ali? Is he the one that was related to Mo?
Is he? I'm not quite sure.
Someone told me to look out for a young England leg spinner related to Moeen Ali, and I'm assuming it would be him with the same name, but I might just be confused. Just before you get to the standout, I saw Straker as well. So Straker was, I did see a lot of clips and saw some games. It's very rare I saw anyone that looked like they could bowl an international delivery. Straker looked like someone who maybe more along that sort of line unit. Hit the pitch very, very hard.
Yeah, he took a 6-4 versus Pakistan, was basically the reason Australia pretty much won that game, right? Because at the end it was down to the wire, and you could make a case that Pakistan should have even won it, right? But anyway, coming back to the bowlers and the standout bowler, of course, who, if you have not watched a clip yet, Jared, there's a compilation of his wickets on Twitter somewhere. you definitely should watch out for Kwena Mapaka because
I've
he
seen him,
is
yeah.
the player of the tournament, 21 wickets in 6 games at less than 10 apiece, which is ridiculous. He hurried batters on both the front foot and back, and he bowled some blistering Yorkers, right? Like a great highlight reel. And I mean, I saw him bowl, and I sort of instantly knew that this kid will make it to the senior team. Much like Rabada all those years ago. I think it was 2014 or something for KG. But you just know, and he's definitely the biggest name I feel to have come out of this Under-19 World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of hype about him already. I don't get that far away from probably playing some franchise cricket. Getting out there, he kind of has all the skills that he needs for that sort of stuff. Again, just, this is the thing about cricket. And Straker might also go in this sort of thing. Sometimes it's the players who physically develop earlier. And he, both of those guys, especially as fast bowlers, just look like they've already physically developed. And so that might mean that they've got more upside, or it might be that this is their peak. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. But they were the two that I thought of as potential players to keep an eye on over the next 1 to 2 years. Whereas there's other talent there, but the other players will take 3-4 years to develop.
With respect to Kwena, I was thinking about which other left-arm South African pacers do we think of, historically. And when I started thinking about that, I couldn't come up with a lot of names. So maybe he could be that guy.
So the player that they had that was really good, and I've forgotten his first name now, but Schultz, which would have been before your time. Everyone thought Schultz would have been great, but he just could never stop getting injured. Obviously, Wayne Parnell, they've kind of persisted with Wayne for years, but hasn't quite worked. Totsobe, was he left arm? And then Buren Hendricks, is he the other one I'm thinking of?
I was thinking of Parnell only. I didn't even think about
they really aren't. The only reason I know this is because for some reason I was writing about this when I was in South Africa. It wasn't just about South Africa, but I was talking to Sean Pollock, and I asked him, do you think there's a reason? And he named all these different players, and I was like, yeah, but outside of Parnell, who basically gets picked also because he can bat, none of the guys have really stuck around. So again, my question is, why haven't you had a good left arm pacer? And we do know, the West Indies is another country, England is another country. There's a few countries that haven't had them. And I don't know if there is a reason, but yeah, that's probably another reason you think he's going to get a go earlier. Plus, if you're a left armer and you can bowl over 85 miles an hour, you're probably going to play franchise cricket at a certain point.
Pretty much. Yeah, I was really excited, with that sort of prospect. And you're right that just because he does have the left arm angle, it's a different skill set altogether that South Africa aren't used to. I expect him to make his senior team debut probably earlier than the other cricketers that we saw in this tournament. But anyway, Jared, 13 minutes in, we're done with section, our first segment. That's never happened in the last, 500 years.
See what happens if I don't watch any cricket.
Pretty much. Anyway, we've got Regista and Sam in the comments as well. So hello to you guys. And we'll be back after a short break to discuss Sri Lanka versus Afghanistan. You're watching Overthrows with Jared and Behram. Stay tuned. After the short break, we'll be back.
So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/timber to get a huge discount off your Nord VPN plan, plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Overthrows. You're with Behram and Jared, and we're going to talk about Sri Lanka versus Afghanistan. So, Jared, after winning the solitary test match, Sri Lanka have taken an unassailable 2-0 lead in the 3-match ODI series. They scored big in both games. So much so that Charatha Asalanka has literally said that we should make batting wickets in Sri Lanka. But here's the good part for them, or good news, is that each of their top 6 batters crossed 50 at least once across both of those games. But there's only one guy who reached triple digits. And Pathum Nissanka, opening batter, he became the first ever Sri Lankan cricketer to score a double 100 in ODI cricket. He carried his bat after scoring 210 off 139 balls. And that is immense, Jared, because A, we didn't expect this. And B, Pathum Nissanka was someone who Mickey Arthur earmarked as one of those guys who would go on to have a successful career during his stint. Mickey, as we know, is great at eyeing talent and developing it. And he's someone who's been around now in the mix for a bit. This is where he's truly staked his claim.
Yeah, look, I mean, he's got an international record of, I don't know what his one-day record is now, but I think he was averaging around 40 in both formats. And he's like 24, 25, right?
Yep.
Like, I think what happens is, maybe people like Mahela and Kumar have kind of ruined their thinking on this, but normal batting, if you're an above average talent, you're probably going to be in the side around 21, 22, 23. Doesn't mean that you're going to develop automatically or you're going to, take to international cricket directly. But to be fair to him, he's been hanging around. So if he then goes and has a big 4 or 5 years, he could go, and I'm talking about in about 1 or 2 years' time, he could end up with a really good record, right? So he's always been one of those players for me within the margins. He's probably still a little bit too low in ODI cricket. I think myself and Estelle have talked about this before. It's not his talent that we're worried about, but you can't really strike at 85, 87 anymore in ODI cricket if you're going to be the anchor, just because that's just too slow to catch the top teams. You can't put any pressure back on the bowling team if you do that. But again, it's a good sign. I mean, his strike rate was 150 in this innings. He should do that all the time. So I don't know if that's bumped up his strike rate as well. But the point being, overall, the very basic level of talent there, I think, was quite evident. And you're just kind of waiting to see if, when you get to that 24, 25 age, one of two things happens. Either everyone has seen enough of you and you start struggling, or the opposite happens and you feel more comfortable and you can go out there. But this is going to give him confidence, right? Like, I know it's against Afghanistan and, it was a Rashid Khan attack, and our old friend, I do mean old, Gulbuddin, bowled 8 overs and, it's clearly not the greatest bowling team that Afghanistan have put out or anything like that. But you make a double 100 and you feel a little bit different. And a lot of these things, it really is about, it's like playing a computer game. It's like unlocking levels. You know what I mean? Of, so
new high score.
Yeah, you know how to use the controller, right? And now he feels comfortable, going into a room and having the battle droids shoot at him, or being shot at in Red Dead Redemption or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Comfortable enough that you can whip the camera angle around and aim the gun where you want. Like, I know it sounds stupid, but it's exactly the same thing at international level. So many times I will talk to players, and quite often I'll ask them this, because I'll say, "You're really good and you're not making any runs," and they'll tell you, I don't really know what it is. And then you talk to them a couple of years later and they'll be like, yeah, I just suddenly worked out what I was doing. Who's in slightly better than that. So maybe he can kick that into an even higher gear from here. But it's a fantastic development for Sri Lanka, because they haven't had many people who can make runs.
That's why I think this has been an important tour. And sure, of course, it's a depleted Afghanistan team as well, because Rashid Khan isn't there. But then again, you don't associate Sri Lanka, or have not associated Sri Lanka with big runs over the last half a decade or so, ever since Sangha and Jayawardene retired. And Pathum Nissanka is someone who, as you said, we all knew was talented, but him going at a faster strike rate, that is very promising. And I mean, look at these guys. There's Nissanka, Fernando up top, that opening pair. Kusal Mendes has kind of changed his game as well. He plays quicker now. Sadira Samra Vikrama has had so much success. The new kid, Lianage, he's doing well. So you've got this group of young players who could be developed till the World Cup. Because remember, they're not playing the Champions Trophy. They're not in it. So
they've got much time to get good.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, Sankalp Verma in the comments is asking, was it uncovered first and then the off-field stuff with overthrows? We switched it. We thought it makes more sense for overthrows to be on-field cricket stuff and uncovered to be off-field cricket stuff. So yeah, now it's going to be overthrows first and uncovered next, and that goes for everyone who's watching. All right, before we move on, let's talk a bit about Afghanistan. Of course, they were obliterated in the second game. Wanindu Hasaranga did a Wanindu Hasaranga, 4 scalps, and only 2 Afghan batters, they crossed double digits, which was both of their run accumulators. Rehmat Shah and Ibrahim Zadran, they both got to 50 as well. But in the first game, chasing 382, Afghanistan lost by just 42 runs. And while the game was kind of always gone, Mohammad Nabi and Azmatullah Omarzai, they slammed career best scores. Nabi, who is called the president for some reason. I really need to know what the etymology of that nickname is.
I think it comes from his time at the Renegades, doesn't it? Where he knew everyone in I think my memory is, I could be wrong, but I know it was definitely made public around the time he played for the Renegades. And I think it was that he kind of acts a little bit like the person who's in charge and he knows everyone. And there's a little bit of, not political in a bad way, but political in a sort of remembers everyone's name and everything. But that's the first time I heard it anyway, when it was at the Renegades.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would be surprised if people in Afghanistan were calling the president, but I don't know. Maybe they do.
I mean, unfortunately, he's 39. Otherwise, I thought that nickname could really catch on. But, second 100 in ODI cricket, very old, probably older than 39, if we're being honest. And happy for him.
He does not remember his 39th birthday, does he?
If Gulbuddin is 32, then Nabi has got to be like, I don't want to comment on this, but he looks
Nabi, before I came to the UK, I think it was like a year or two before I came to the UK, Nabi was playing at the club that I played at as the overseas pro. And they were they weren't talking about him as if he was like a young guy then. And that was like 2006, I think I want to say. So I'm just putting it out there. He might be slightly older than advertised.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, happy for him. We all know what he can do, and he's hit a bit of a purple patch as well later on in his career. So 136, definitely great, but not the biggest story. The biggest story is Azmatullah Omarzai, of course. 149 unbeaten of 115 deliveries. His rise has been emphatic if you look at the last however many months, right? His knock was berserk. It's been that way for a lot of knocks. I've seen him come out and attack. And, he's averaging over 50 now in 18 ODI innings. And this is a guy who's quite handy with the ball as well. In fact, in the second game, he ended up with figures of 3 for 56. So can Afghan fans be super excited that they've got like a, premier seam bowling all-rounder in their wings? Or should we still wait a bit?
I think we talked about him in the World Cup, didn't we? Like, and that was the kind of the conversation we had at the time. Look, I don't think he is, I don't know about his bowling. Like, I like the pace of it, but it's kind of a little bit all over the place. Maybe he'll just be able to work out some extra tricks as he goes forward. But he's not particularly consistent. In this game, I think you're talking 10 and over, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's going to happen to him occasionally. And I do think he's miscast slightly because sometimes he's the second seam bowler and he should obviously be the third or fourth seam bowler at most. But they don't have a choice. And, they're trying to fit extra players into that side. And because of his all-round skill, his batting I really like. I think he's very green. So I compare him to Baz Delita, right? I saw Baz Delita and I was like, there's so much here, but he needs to develop. And almost overnight, Baz Delita seemed to develop both sides of his game. And, he's done a very similar kind of thing where you just like, oh, yeah, I can see he might be a player. Oh, wait, he's a player already. How did this happen? So I'd be very excited if I was an Afghanistan fan about him. I don't know he's ever going to be in their best five bowlers. If he can get to a point where he's good enough to bat in their top six, and he certainly looks like that at the moment. Let's say he bats at number 5 or number 6, and he can get you 12 to 15 overs and innings in test matches, and get you 6 to 7 overs in one days, and at least 2 overs in a T20. That's a huge win, right? And as you said, I think he is probably. Well, I mean, his bowling is still developing, but my guess is with his bowling, he's probably a wicket taker more than he is a line and length bowler or economical bowler. But we haven't really seen the wicket taking enough in his career so far, and that's a little bit of a worry because it's kind of got to be okay with one or with the other. And you watch him play, and you're not quite sure if he's going to be able to consistently do that, but he said in one-day cricket, in T20 cricket, he's just got to find a period of the game that matches his bowling. And in Test match cricket, I actually like his bowling a little bit more in Test match cricket because we haven't seen many of these players. I'm trying to think of someone else, but we haven't seen a bowler like him in a long time who is an attacking fifth option, if you know what I mean. I was going to say Stokes, but even Stokes could bowl. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's like a Stokes kind of bowler where you just go, look, if you go for runs, you go for runs. It doesn't matter. We've got 4 other guys who can keep it tight, but just bowl some stuff. Dougie Walters, Ben Stokes.
Stokes was pretty quick, though, back in the day when his knee was functional.
That's what I mean. But if you look at Stokes, he was kind of bowling every ball for wickets. Most of the all-rounders you kind of get are more like Brian McMillan and Steve Waugh and Paul Collingwood and Sourav Ganguly, where you're just like, okay, they're just, it was Shane Watson, where they're all just kind of economically nagging on a length. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's actually more fun to have the guy who's just like, I'm not a full-time bowler, so I'm going to try and take a wicket every ball. And you don't get as many of those out there. I think batters usually too sensible to do that sort of nonsense, but I think he could be that kind of player. But white ball bowling, I don't know where he fits in. Batting, I think we saw him in the World Cup at times. He needs to tighten up his game in certain ways, but his power and his eye are, incredible.
Yeah, so I first saw him in the PSL, actually playing for the Peshawar Zalmi, and I didn't know much about him prior to that. And my thoughts back then were also that, okay, at the death, if you're giving him an over, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
But with the bat, ever since, because I've kept an eye on this kid, since then, I have seen a lot of progress. And he strikes it at a very high rate. That's something that Afghanistan also needs, because they've got Zadran and Rehmat Shah, who are consistent run accumulators, but the strike rate is an issue. So I don't know how long Mohammad Nabi can play, but having him and Umar Zai, who can come and strike it big after those two guys, that would do their combination well, because Gurbaz could come up trumps up top as well, right? And we've constantly said that if Afghanistan can get to those 280s, 290s consistently on, surfaces that offer a bit for everyone, then they could be a better team. But I suppose that's pretty much all we can discuss from this series. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with Australia versus the West Indies. You're watching Overthrows with Jared and Behram. Don't go anywhere. We're back here shortly. Stay tuned.
Ever wondered why slower deliveries work, what a zombie ball is, or how Sunil Gavaskar would have batted in T20? Well, we have the channel for you, Good Areas. Twice a week, we have a new deep dive into a great story from cricket on our main channel, Good Areas. It is the history and present of cricket as narrated by me. If you make any content, Memento is the tool for you. Take your long format pods and meetings and anything you have and let Memento cut and slice it up for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try memento.fm today.
Hello and welcome back to Overthrows. You're with Behram and Jared, and we're going to talk about Australia versus the West Indies. And Australia swept the ODI series 3-0 as you would expect them to. And then they too took a 2-0 unassailable lead in the T20s. Glenn Maxwell, upon return from the hospital, he smashed an unbeaten 55-ball 120, which, Jared, is his second ton in T20 internationals in 3 innings. He is now tied with Rohit Sharma for the most number of hundreds in T20 internationals, which is 5. And it feels like since that 200 versus Afghanistan in the World Cup, he's been batting on another planet. This is probably the best we've seen of him.
Yeah, I think we talked about it when he was injured. He's not the same athlete he used to be, right? Yeah. We talked about this when he got the cramps during that World Cup game. But if you look at it overall, he talked about coming into that World Cup that he wasn't the fielder he used to be after he broke his leg at that party and, all those different things, and wasn't the same kind of athlete. I think there's an element here of him just having to pare down a little bit what he does, right? And just focus on, the very obvious things of, I'm going to, play these shots in this situation and not try and play a different shot every ball. And look, I think his record was fantastic beforehand, and I've got no problem with the way he had played earlier. But if he could get to that kind of state, and to be fair to Australia, this is kind of what they always wanted from him, except they went about it the wrong way. Also, they didn't quite understand what Glenn Maxwell was. And I think now giving him the freedom is and with him maybe, as I said, slightly reduced in athleticism, I think he's just a little bit more focused. Could also just be, late career, he's worked out his game a little bit more. There's always been looseness within his game, straight full balls from fast bowlers, not particularly good against the short ball all the time. Compared to other top batters of his level, he's got a lot more holes within his game. And perhaps as he's getting older, he's learning how to negate those a little bit more, and then just play to his strengths rather than try and play every shot that has ever been invented and then reversing it.
Yeah. I mean, I recently was picking, with my pro sports gig, we were creating a perfect batter. And for reverse sweeps, I had like AB and Joss Butler in my mind, but recency bias made me go for Maxwell. So that's certainly something that is iconic with respect to him. But
he can reverse sweep quick bowlers. There's your difference. He can reverse sweep spinners and quicks. And he can switch it.
That's true. So it's interesting how, you said that, of course, the athleticism has suffered. And I mean, there's some other issues as well. But when it comes to power, 109 meters, that's how big a six was that Maxwell hit. And I mean, look, he might not play another T20 World Cup, right? Let's be honest. This
Wait,
could
is
be
that a
his last.
12? Is that a 12 in KP?
It's a 9 for AB. Yeah, 9 for AB and 12 for KP.
Yeah, just
That's
making
basically what it
sure that everyone understands. Although if you miss that social media moment, you probably won't.
Yeah, you probably. I've made some references to it already on Twitter, and a lot of people were asking me for context. I can't give you the context. It's too layered. There's so much to it. Anyway, so obviously, like, he's not that young anymore. He's no spring chicken, and this might be his last T20 World Cup. David Warner is another one of those guys. He scored a 36-ball 70. Again, retired recently from both ODIs and tests. And with these two guys in form, going into a T20 World Cup, who might not ever get to play another one of those cups again, you'd have to say Australia are prime contenders to lift the T20 World Cup at this point. I mean, they've won everything in the last year, all ICC events. We'd be hard-pressed to believe that they couldn't win this one either.
Yeah, well, they'll certainly be among the favourites for the next tournament and also for the women's tournament. So they've got a couple more tournaments that they're due to win, I suppose. Look, if Maxwell's playing at this level, then he is, ridiculous. And same with Warner. If Warner can unlock those sort of, what would you call them, 60 off 35, type innings that we've seen from him before, or 60 of, what did I say? 35? Did I say 35?
Yeah.
I did, didn't I? Those kinds of innings consistently, then that allows Australia to kind of do anything. And then you've got Mitchell Marsh as well. And Travis Head, I don't know if he's even in the T20 side, but
I think he's going to New Zealand. And interestingly, Patty Cummins is in the team in the New Zealand series, but Mitch Marsh is leading it. So there might be something brewing over here in terms of captaincy.
I think they have to find a way to get Pat Cummins a rest, I think, as much as anything. Yeah. But yeah, so bowling is still, I wouldn't say an issue, but, Mitchell Starc isn't the bowler he used to be. Pat Cummins hasn't been a good T20 bowler, essentially since he got to the test team in some ways.
Yeah.
Hazelwood's obviously been very good, and it will suit Zampa. But yeah, I think there are clearly some issues within that, but Maxwell can win them a couple of games, and no one's going to want to go up against him in an important game once he gets set, right? I mean, that's the truth of Maxwell, and that's always the issue with Maxwell. India probably more set up than most to go up against him because of Bumrah. But, most teams, sadly, as far as I'm aware, do not have Bumrah.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at Australia, I look at a team which is really high on confidence. And when I think of these two players in particular, Maxwell and Warner, I think the drive is going to be 10 times higher because they know they've already achieved so much. They just want to probably end on an absolute high. And I mean, it's likely, but did you catch that moment? Shamar Joseph was run out. There was no appeal. And the umpire said it's not out. We've seen this before in the IPL.
Yeah,
that
I didn't. Someone sent me it, but I forgot to go back and have a look at it. Yeah, it's a weird one because I would have thought they still had a chance to make a appeal when it was given. Well, I can't even say it was given not out because if you don't appeal, it's just not out.
Yeah.
But I thought the timings were a little bit odd. But yeah, until the bowler was at the top of his mark for the next delivery, they had a chance to appeal for that. But yeah, you've got to appeal. That's it's why we appeal. That's part of it. Is the phrase "How's that?" Right? There is the question is implied within the "How's that?" So certainly, as you said, we've seen it in the IPL. I've seen it before in certain situations. I actually had a situation in a club game once where I was wicket keeping. I took the bails off and I was so excited at my wicket keeping. I sort of went, ah. And the square leg umpire said, "Are you appealing?" And I wasn't really. I was just excited. And I went, "Yes, I am." And he went, "That's out." So sometimes the umpires will give you a bit of a clue if you have an appeal. But yeah, in general, always appeal.
Yeah, or unless you're Stuart Broad, because then the celeb appeal could potentially work for you. The umpire could be like, all right. Or just these cricketers, the Australian guys probably need to play cricket 24 because you cannot get a dismissal unless you appeal in that game. So there's that.
I actually think in the video games, it's one of the more annoying things. And especially with I don't always play computer games with sound on. and you can't tell if it's hit the pad or the bat. And so if someone's played a perfect defensive shot, you have to appeal. It's just, it just delays the next ball. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's a weird pet peeve to have, but it is a pet peeve.
Good thing about the PS5 is that your controller does a little vibrate-y thing when
it hits the
those
pad.
sort of things happen. When it hits, a pad, or if the batter edges it, so that helps definitely. It's a really good console. Yeah, I would recommend.
I'm not sure if the 4 does
10.
that. I'll have to have a look if my 4 does that. But
you've got these motion sensors in the PS5 controllers, in which a lot of games you just have to move the controller physically and then things happen. But yeah, this is a podcast about cricket, not about gaming consoles. So we'll come back.
No, it's a podcast about cricket gaming.
Yeah, fair enough. Josh Ford says Maxwell has always seemed like someone whose face didn't fit in the Aussie team. That's an interesting one. Don't know what you mean over there, but yeah, definitely.
What he means is that they didn't particularly like who he was at all times. He didn't really play the Australian game of doing. I mean, they used to complain about how he warmed up, and how he trained in the nets, and there was I think there were some reasonable issues as well. But we saw Andrew Simons. They spent a generation trying to pare back Andrew Simons, and look at Andrew Simons' early T20 numbers, and you will know like what he could have been. He could have averaged 30 with a strike rate of 140 in ODI cricket, Andrew Simons, right? And in the end, they got him averaging 40 with a strike rate of 90, right? And they tried to do the same thing with Maxwell. Slightly two different characters. I think Andrew Simons was kind of just wanted to whack it, and eventually found out if he didn't try and whack everything, they would, allow him to be who he wanted to be occasionally. Whereas I think Maxwell's probably, as far as cricketers go between the two of them, just a little bit more creative, a little bit more out of the box than Simons, inventing stuff and everything else. So he would quite rightfully say, you can't throw me out in a T20 and ask me to make 100 off 30 balls and then complain that I practice in the nets the way they do, because those two things are directly related. And so there were some issues there. And, I think he's ruffled feathers at times. Never played a test in Australia, for instance. There's some interesting things about Glenn Maxwell, the cricketer, when we look back at it. But a lot of it was he just wasn't quite the player they wanted him to be, and that's a typical Australian thing. They will try and break you until you do what you are supposed to do. He's not the first.
Definitely. I also think he's underused as a test player in Asia, because he could have been a Moeen Ali sort of utility player where he could come and play free-flowing cricket and also give it a rip every now and then with the ball. Sankalp Verma has an interesting question. He says, is appealing law or convention?
Law.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And we also
I'm assuming it probably started as convention. If you going back to the late 1700s when the laws were written, I'm assuming that it comes from people asking questions and then they wrote it into the laws. And also, the fun thing about appealing is you only need to appeal once and it covers all appeals, which is, weird, fascinating.
Yeah.
But you don't have to say I'm appealing for the LBW. You have to say that, and then you let the umpire decide on what he thinks it's out for.
Yeah, definitely. We've got some more people in the comments. KKY all the way says Behram survived the Pakistan elections. Knock on wood, fingers crossed. We also have Tajiram, Deodat, and Nikon Kohli Pakam. I know you guys have lots of questions, but we have lots to cover as well. So if you really want them to be answered, I know I did a few free ones, but we usually take super chats. So that way we'll definitely take some time out, have your name up on the screen and address your question. Anyway, let's go to the West Indies. They might have lost the series, but they did score over 200 runs in both T20s. And the likes of Brandon King, Johnson Charles, Andre Russell, they all impressed in patches. In fact, Jason Holder ended up scoring like 62 runs off 31 deliveries. It wasn't dismissed in this series, or still isn't dismissed series across both games. So good on his average. But the bowling has let them down. But they can still take a lot of heart from these games, because look, they'll be playing a T20 World Cup in their own conditions. And if they're doing or batting this way away from home, there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like the names that you say, they're not quite A-level tier names anymore. Like Andre Russell obviously probably is still A-level, but he was once S-tier and he's come down to A-level. Johnson Charles is, he's had a phenomenally weird career. Me and Michelle did a podcast about him a while back. He's, interesting, and Brandon King's interesting, but it's still, I'm not sure if you go into a World Cup feeling like that's the team that's going to make you a lot of runs. I've seen them bowl, you know, they put a lot into Shamar Joseph, and Shamar Joseph, the limited overs bowler, really hasn't paid off for them consistently. You know, they've got that young kid, Matthew Ford, who's a really, really skillful bowler, but really quite slow. You know, Obed McCoy, you know, he's a fantastic bowler for all 5 minutes that he's ever fit, sadly for him. You know, some of the other guys as well, like just, you know, two of the other fast bowlers.
Jaden Seals and Odean.
Well, I was going to say Odean and who's the big fella, the really fast guy. Just haven't worked. They're just not consistent enough. But yeah, Jaden Seal, you know, a Chima Holder, you know, they've just got a lot of guys that have kind of just not taken that next mantle. And, you know, I think when we look back at the Great West Indian T20 team, we do focus more on the all-rounders and the batters and Sunil Narine and Samuel Badri, you know, but they usually have one or two bowlers that they could just bank on. And really, Obed McCoy should have been that guy by now. He's probably the one I trust the most out of all the guys I've just mentioned there. And Shamar Joseph should be better than he is. They only need kind of two of them, but they need those two to be really good. You know, they've tried to bowl like Romario Shepherd with the new ball and Romario Shepherd at the death, and they've tried to bowl Jason Holder at the death, and these guys just get hammered, right?
Yeah.
And they need, you know, especially they need one great new ball seamer and probably one great death seamer, and that should be really Shamar Joseph at the top and Obed McCoy at the end. But they haven't managed to do that, and no one else has really stood up. So there's kind of, you know, a huge gap within their again. And it's not entirely talent. Some of it is just development and bad luck and injuries. But truth is that you know, they're going to struggle to win in the World Cup in USA and West Indies without one of those bowlers I just said stepping up, and probably two of them.
They'll be over-reliant on Gudakesh Moti to do well in those slower surfaces, I feel, in that World Cup. But it's interesting, you mentioned all of these things, but I want to discuss tactics a bit too, because, of course, if death bowling is a problem, you know, Rovman Powell is someone who's been around for a bit, but he's a young captain. He's still scoring runs. He got a 63-odd score in this T20 series as well. But do you think he's the best fit to lead them in this T20 World Cup?
Who would you have?
I don't know, someone more experienced. Maybe Dre Russ could do it.
I don't know Dre Russ very well, but I get the feeling that he's a very, I don't want to say shy, but like an insular sort of person. I don't mean that in a bad way, but just they basically want him to get the last dying breaths out of his knees, right? Like I think they just want him to spend as much time as possible doing that. Who else have you got on the list?
Yeah, I mean, not Brandon King or Johnson Charles for sure. Nick Pooran when he's available?
I think after the last time Pooran captained, I don't think he's going to captain again. Look, I like Rovman. I tried to get him to St. Lucia when I was the general manager there, you know, with a view that he would play under Kyron Pollard and then eventually maybe take over that position, you know, as a captain going ahead. He's a smart young guy, thinks about his cricket, developed himself quite a lot. It's probably not an ideal situation for a captain, but I also don't think that he's the reason that they're struggling. I think that their batting is just not quite good enough, if we're being honest, and they haven't worked out, you know, top level seamers. The other problem is they have this really weird one. So Rodman Powell, Kyle Mayers, give me some more. Jason Holder, Andre Russell. I feel like there's another one I'm forgetting as well. They've got all these guys with all-round skills, but they all basically bowl right arm. See?
Yeah. We've like talked about this in the past.
Have we? Sorry, yeah.
It's very, very one-dimensional.
It's just such an overlap of skills. It's just like, can not one of you be left arm or bowl some spin or something? Like, it's such an awkward thing to have happen to, you know, have that many players with all-round skill that you can't really use all that much.
Sheldon Cottrell is the only name coming to mind in recent times, right?
Obed, Sheldon both bowl left arm. I think they're the only two that I can think of modern times. As I was saying before, they're another country that, they had Garfield Sobers, and it's almost like cricket said to them, well, you had a pretty good player. We're never going to give you any more left arm pace. So good luck with the future. and to be honest, for 20 odd years, it went fine. It's just been since then that they've struggled a little bit. But they don't have a lot of left arm pace. But even, just one of them being able to bowl spin, like just something different that they could bring. And it's like, because like Rovman is not a terrible bowler, right? And Rovman in a side like Australia gives you some Marcus options, right? That's all it is. Yeah. But in this side, it's like, well, when the hell is he ever going to bowl himself, right? And like Kyle Mayers, good little. The ball's doing a little bit on if the white ball's nipping around a little bit, you throw it to Kyle Mayers early on, but you don't want to have to bowl him when that's not the case, right? And Jason Holder kind of looks like he should be a better T20 bowler than he is. He takes a lot of wickets at the death, and so his average usually looks good, but he goes at like 10 and 11 and over to do that. Yeah. It's just a bit good. And they all kind of need to bowl in the middle bit for maybe Mayers. So
there's a name though. Jason Holder could be someone who could lead them. But anyway, I think we've
Holder and Puran are not going to captain them again, man.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I'd probably make an argument that Holder provides more utility with the bat as opposed to with the ball. But we've got a super chat. ARR has sent one. So let's take that. He says, is Indian cricket team the most underachieving team?
I'd say the Argentinian men's team definitely would be the most underachieving team. They should have got test status back in the 1930s, and they've still not won a test.
Yeah, I think with India, they are one of the most and arguably the most talented unit in the world. You could maybe make an argument with respect to the trophy cabinet, but no, they're not underachieving. I don't think so.
I mean, I suppose it depends on how you look at it, right? Like if you're looking at it purely on talent, you might say that the most underachieving team. What's the tournaments that we honestly think? So since, was it 2013 when they beat England Champions Trophy, right?
Yes.
So they ran into what, if you now look on paper, looks like an epically great team of Sri Lanka, right? In 2014. Yep. 2016, they run into Andre Russell, Samuel Badri, all the guys we were just talking about a minute ago. Like
2015, they run into Australia at home with
I forgot that one.
Stark. Yeah, going crazy.
2017, probably one great day from Pakistan, who were on a high in the second half of that tournament, which I think is also fair. But looking back, that's the one that you say they probably could have won. What's the next one? 2019, they had the split day thing in against New Zealand, and also probably meant they had to go 2 bites of the chair. They probably had to bat on the sort of the day when the ball was doing a little bit more, although it was doing a bit on both days, if we're being honest. But certainly didn't help them, whereas probably helped New Zealand more. 2022.
19. No, 19.
That was 19.
That's a split innings or split day semi-final.
2022 in UAE, they were just crap.
No. That was 2021. 2022, they ran into England and kind of folded in that semi. Yeah.
Yep. Again, against the better team. So you would say that they probably should have beaten Australia in this last one. And World Test Championship final, I would say that Australia and New Zealand in those conditions would be slight favourites, although India is still a fantastic team as well. So really, of all those things that they've gone into, in the actual games they've gone up against, you would have to say that the vast majority, they have been around a par chance of winning or just slightly less than par. They've gone up against some teams that were just, as I said, the 2014, 2016, 2019, 2022 England. So they've gone up against some teams that just were obviously on a different level now looking back, and maybe we didn't give that at the time. But, if you're looking at pure talent, I still think it's almost fluky the amount of times they haven't won, considering how many finals they've been in, how many semifinals they've been in, how much talent they've had. So I would, from that point of view, if you played all of those games that we just went through again, they probably win a few more of those and win 1 or 2 titles if you played it back. Like if you played all these games 100 times, India probably win 2 or 3 titles out of all that period that we just talked about. But
then you take away the pressure, right? Yeah, and that's the...
But they don't play them 100 times, do they? They play them once, and they do have more pressure. New Zealand make a semi-final. No, there's like 3 people in New Zealand who raise half an eyebrow, right?
Yeah.
Like it is a completely different world that they play in compared to everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like if you look at ICC tournaments alone, you can maybe make a case for India. But if you look at them overall, they are far from underachieving. They are very much achieving, right? You'd want to have a record like India's over the last decade and a half.
Yeah.
Basically.
Bilaterally, they're not underachieving, but they're underachieving in the games that matter. I mean, I don't think anyone can deny that.
Yeah, pretty much. Also, Orville De Silva says, I see London-based Jared in a tee and Karachi-based Behram. No, Islamabad-based Behram in a jacket. That's why there's a jacket. I'm Islamabad-based.
Got a cardigan.
Yeah,
That's a
got
light cardigan. My
has-
my office is really hot. I don't know why. It's always like 5 degrees hotter than the rest of the house, but it is. So it's yeah, that's why if you ever see me in a t-shirt, it's got nothing to do with London. The rest of London's still just as cold as ever.
Yeah. Also, you've got central heating. Over here, we have these inverter things, which are also air conditioners. But I don't have it on. I just have on the jacket because my studio is detached from my house. I have to
I'm trying to
actually
work
walk
out
outside.
if this is more boring than the AI conversation I started with, or more boring than the gaming conversation and the consoles that we were talking about before. But I don't think it is.
Yeah. Anyway, let's end this segment. But before that, I just want to ask you, can you guess what Xavier Bartlett's numbers are after 2 ODIs? Don't cheat. Just
No.
guess.
Was he, I don't know, 5 wickets at 12 or something, would it be?
He's got 8 wickets for 38 runs at an average of 4.75 and an economy of 2.35. He is Scotty Bolanding ODI cricket as things stand.
I mean, yeah, he should retire. I don't know why players play on. Like, why would you just not retire with those numbers? Tell all your friends down the pub. And then imagine how many times you could win bets with people around the world when you're like, yeah, I played some games for Australia. I averaged 4.85, right? And then they're not going to believe you. So that was a much better career than being a cricketer.
Yeah, Xavier Bartlett, if you're watching this, here's a suggestion. But anyway, we'll be back after this short break. You're watching Overthrows with Behram and Jared. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
If you watch this channel, you'll love us on Main, where we do deep dives into the greatest cricket stories every week at Good Areas. How did Virat Kohli play that shot? What is so weird about Neil Wagner? And explaining the incredible misery of being a New Zealand opening batter. Visit our Good Areas site today. Want to show the world that you not only love cricket, but that you know the game deeply? Well, you need a Bodyline t-shirt. In fact, at Bodyline t-shirts, you can actually buy a t-shirt about Bodyline, but also tees inspired by the greatest players in our game. Head to Bodyline t-shirts today.
Welcome back to Overthrows. You're with Jared and Behram, and we're going to go to New Zealand versus South Africa next. And the last time we spoke on Overthrows, that test, the first test between New Zealand and South Africa at Mount Maunganui, it was underway. And Rachin Ravindra had already scored that 240. So if you want to hear us talk about that, go to the previous episode, not this one. And unsurprisingly, New Zealand did go on to win the test by a hefty margin of 281 runs. Kane Williamson ended up with the twin hundreds in the test. And now, Jared, he has 31 tons in 170 innings in the format. That is the best hundreds to innings ratio amongst the Fab Four. But we all know that he's been a bit of a home ground or, home conditions bully. He averages nearly 70 in test cricket at home. So, keeping all of those things in mind, here's a very loaded question for you. Where do you think he ranks in the Fab Four?
Probably 4th.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that.
Look, because he's from a smaller nation, I've kind of looked for excuses to push him up. And I love watching him bat as well. I've certainly loved him as a cricketer. But when you actually go through his record line by line, sorts of ways that people like me and Cheyenne do, we find it really hard to push him back up. I still think he's a better player than Martin Crowe. Although, Martin Crowe at his peak was absolutely fantastic as well. And those are probably them and Glenn Turner are probably the obvious choices for best batters ever. And Glenn Turner and Martin Crowe are probably slightly better than their records make them look. Mm-hmm. And Kane's probably a lot worse than his record makes him look, but he still makes those runs. He still had to score them. But I don't know. I'll try to remember. Is it against India, Australia, and England? He doesn't have a high average, or is it just India or Australia? Again, he's made 200s here, but again, it's against a poorer attack. And every time you pick through his record, unfortunately, that does come across. He makes a lot of runs at home and a lot of runs against average teams, or worse teams in some cases. So I hate that. I hate talking about that. But if you're talking about nitpicking between greatness, that's what you start to do, right?
I mean, you've got Steve Smith, right? Whose first innings and second innings average out of 4 propels him to the best since Bradman's status. Although we've done an entire Footmarks on this, so if you guys want to know more about it, Smudger Can't Snooze. That's the Footmarks podcast that you could go listen to. And then Kohli.
Behram only brings that up because he likes his title.
Yeah, I love that title. And Kohli, you have to factor in that he's been playing on dust bowls at home for a bit, so that average had to come down. Joe Root, actually, if you look at the last 3-4 years, I would say he's top of the pile in the Fab Four just in that period, because he had that conversion rate problem, and then he just started scoring hundreds for fun. And I'd say that those hundreds are worth more than maybe Kane's 31, even though Kane has the most hundreds out of the 4. So yeah, it's interesting. The conversation will, continue till those careers are finished, and then we'll probably do a podcast on it or something. But there's another super chat, Jared, by Conrad McBad. So we can take his question and then move on. Okay, with the emergence of Glenn Phillips as a genuine all-rounder?
Yeah, he's
Conrad
allowed to
McBad.
ask this question because he paid for it, right?
Yeah.
But just so we're all aware, if you throw in Glenn Phillips, genuine all-rounder, without sarcastic italic font, I don't know if I'm going to take it normally, but continue, Conrad McBad.
Yeah. Golden Arm Glenn is now Glenn Phillips, a genuine all-rounder. But anyway, and Rachin Ravindra being a decent part-time spin option, you're going to get a beating or something from Jared after this one. Is there a way back into the New Zealand Test team for Michael Bracewell?
Yeah, he's certainly still the best bowler of those 3. I mean, I don't know how to fully explain Glenn Phillips' success, if we're being honest.
And there have been several uncovered episodes in which Jared has literally shat on Rachin Ravindra, the bowler. Okay? You can go to multiple episodes where he's done that.
Look,
Decent
the basic
is a stretch.
Yeah, the basic thing is that they are both very part-time, I think. But, them playing together is interesting, because I do think that changes things. But Michael Bracewell, I think, certainly has an extra... if you watch Michael Bracewell, he actually gets the ball to be correctly flighted and drift and spin. And he thinks about his spin bowling a little bit more than someone like Rachin Ravindra would. You've also got his batting and his fielding. So I would still think I think their plan is probably... They like having 5 bowlers. So if that's their plan, it probably... And Blundell's batting so well, you probably bat Blundell at 6, don't you? And you bat Bracewell at 7. That gives you 5 genuine bowlers, and then they can use their strength of the 4 seamers. But if you have Glenn Phillips and you have Michael Bracewell and you have Rachin Ravindra, you give the ball to Bracewell first. But in certain situations, Rachin Ravindra's bowling is quite handy, and Glenn Phillips is Glenn Phillips. He's going to be asking you to bowl all the way through anyway, right? So you're never going to forget you have him. I don't have any issue there. But if you're asking me, like, if the spin stylings of those 2 is better than Michael Bracewell or enough combined to keep him out the side, I don't think it is. I think he's a much better bowler than that. Also, he's a much better bowler on sort of flat wickets against really good batters. Like, I saw him bowl really well at times over the couple of times I've seen him play in Test cricket already. He's not, and none of these guys are specialist spinners, if we're being honest. Yeah. But he's the one that is most likely to pretend to be a specialist spinner. And we have seen Rachin Ravindra bowl half trackers a lot, and Glenn Phillips doesn't. I'm not sure Glenn Phillips knows what's actually going to come out of his hand sometimes. So there's a big difference there. But I could still certainly see a way for Michael Bracewell to play. But it might also might depend on how much they feel comfortable about Glenn Phillips batting at 5. Because they probably would prefer Glenn Phillips to bat at 6 until, he proves it. But I suppose in my ideal situation, that if Phillips is good enough to bat at 5, and then you've got Blundell, who's certainly making enough runs to bat at 6, and then Bracewell at 7. That's quite handy. But you could go the other way. You could bat Bracewell at 8, Phillips at 6.
Yeah.
And and you've still got Rachin's overs.
Here's a thought. When they're playing at home, Santner gets the nod more often than not, and you can understand why. When they're playing away from home, in Asia in particular, Phillips just had a brilliant series in Bangladesh. Rachin Ravindra just scored 240 odd at home, so you'd expect him to get a game in Asia. That leaves you with the option of playing 2 more spinners, and one of those guys is probably going to be Jaz Patel, right? So if you can add Michael Bracewell to the mix, that's someone who gives you batting depth as well. So Maybe might be a no-brainer, right?
Even at home, I don't know how much Santner will keep Bracewell out of the side. Unless, I mean, I haven't seen him. I don't know how fit he is, or I mean, he was an incredible athlete before. I'm assuming he's still the beast, right? As was his nickname. He's still that kind of person. If he's still that kind of player and athlete and mover and everything else, I think you pick him ahead of Santner because he's a better bat than Santner.
Yeah.
Santner's bowling isn't particularly all that special, and he's a better fielder. Not that Santner's a bad fielder, but Bracewell's an even better fielder again. So I just think when you put all those things together, he's still a better player away. And as you said, Ajaz Patel comes into the side away from home, and then you pick Bracewell as your what? I think you said it before, that kind of Moeen Ali role. And Ratchin Ravindra and Glenn Phillips are not that level of a player.
Definitely wouldn't want them to bowl a lot of overs. But, it is interesting because I don't know where Glenn Phillips will go in his bowling arc. So definitely one to keep out for. And thanks for the super chat. That was a very generous super chat now that I see Conrad McBad. So, yeah, love you, dude. Anyway, moving on. Kyle Jamieson is back amongst the wickets in Test cricket after a while, Jared. He took 6 at Mount Maunganui and 4 in the second innings. He's someone who really rose onto the scene and created waves or shock waves, won a World Test Championship, was taking wickets at an alarming rate, and then injury kind of hampered his progress. Now he's 29 years of age, still that tall, so definitely has the height advantage and generate a lot of bounce. But I just look at New Zealand's attack with Kyle Jamieson and without Kyle Jamieson, and there's a world of difference between the two.
Yeah, look, he probably comes in just as the other three are starting to age out, right? Like, Wagner is slowing down in pace, certainly. Trent Bolt is a freelance player by that point, and Tim Southey is, probably certainly should be on the downward spiral of his career. Although I haven't seen any massive, problems with pace. But we also know, we've seen some of the other, forgetting Lockie Ferguson and Matt Henry. We've seen some of the other guys that they've tried haven't been on that level. Matt Henry can never stay fit. Lockie Ferguson's basically a white ball bowler now, and I'm missing the other one whose name I always forget. But
Matt Henry.
No, Matt Henry. I said him. Lockie Ferguson.
Milne. Adam Milne.
And Milne. So Milne and Henry is basically just about fitness. Now I don't know if Milne's ever going to play red ball cricket. So look, and the thing with Jameson is he's a legit Test match strike bowler, and has been from almost the first ball we saw him bowl. He should have another 3 or 4 years of really good cricket left in him, whether New Zealand can use it. If maybe the best thing that happened in New Zealand cricket was him not playing particularly well in the IPL. I don't know, but
that's actually a fair point.
It keeps him around a little bit more. But I thought just at the point I thought New Zealand was going to drop off, that's when he turned up. And obviously you were talking about Scotty Boland. He was Scotty Boland before there was Scotty Boland, right? So I saw him bowl in India on flat pitches. And I still thought he was fantastic even when he wasn't taking wickets. I'm a huge fan of Kyle Jamieson. And he's, he's a huge man to be a huge fan of, if we're being honest. But, no, so I'm glad that he's back. But again, there's still, you look at 2, 3, 4 of those seamers. It's just the ability to get them on the ground 2 and 3 games in a row, right?
Pretty much. But New Zealand don't play a lot of Test cricket. So I'm hoping that Jamieson can at least have 50 to 60 tests in his career, because I absolutely love him applying his trade with the red ball. It's also quite a handy bat, when he's on song. We've got another super chat. Today is one of those days where people are being quite generous, and we'll take it. We're not complaining.
You know what they say in cricket? 1 brings 2. In this case, 1 brings 3.
Yeah, basically. Anish Raja. Hello, guys. Why does cricket broadcasting in Australia and India look so different? Every match in Australia and England looks like an IMAX level show. I think Sky does it best, if I'm being, subjective.
I was told recently about the amount of money that Sky put into a day's broadcast. That might be the difference. I think there's also an element of, I could be wrong, Anish, but I think there's an element of the air quality on camera, which would be and I might be wrong, I don't know, but I definitely think that, as someone who spent some time in some parts of the subcontinent, the air isn't as clear. And if you're filming that on high definition, it would look a little bit dustier perhaps at times.
Also,
and also just dust.
I felt like Star Sports didn't give too much of a shit about it. I feel like this coverage that I just saw, India and England, it was better than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, if you go back and watch old footage, it is hilarious. Some of the things, like I'm pretty sure there was a whole test match filmed out of someone's ass in Pakistan once because it makes no sense how bad that camera was. Right? It was like they got an uncle on his way to a wedding, and said, "Well, what you got a Super 8 camera? Do you want to come and film this test match for us?" So yeah, I do think that's the case. There's a lot more money in sports broadcasting and I mean production, not rights issues, because we know how much money there is in rights issues. But there's a lot more money in sports production when it comes to Australia and England. Not just, whereas in cricket, like in Indian cricket, the rest of Indian sports won't have any money in their sports production, right? Whereas English cricket is broadcasting up against football, right? And the same with cricket, it's broadcasting up against other major sporting codes that are putting a lot of money into their production. So that's might play a part of it. But I think if you look traditionally, this is something you've always seen. That's why I think maybe perhaps, and I could be wrong, but air quality, and just anyone who's ever been to India specifically or Sri Lanka, there is like a lot of, it feels like it is hazier to me. Like, the dust around the streets and everything like that. Like I haven't spent as much time in Pakistan, any time in Pakistan, but
fairly the same at this time of the year. It's terrible in Lahore, actually. In Karachi isn't far behind. Where I live, Islamabad generally tends to be a lot better. And you've got the mountains close by. So when it rains, it gets pretty nice over here. But yeah, the air quality one, I actually never thought of that with respect to broadcasting. It's a fantastic point. I think there's some truth over there to it.
Yeah, because it's just something I've thought about it a lot, because I used to watch so much cricket, and it was always hilarious to me how every country looks so different on TV. So I wonder if that's a part of it. But I do think when you don't have competition for your sport, when your sport is automatically the number one, it doesn't make as much sense. Whereas you think about Sky, like, we spend a lot of money on this cricket. If we don't make it look good, they might flick over to Wimbledon. Yeah. Right? Like there might be a football game on or whatever, or rugby. I don't even know what clashes 100% with the summer, but all the things that can clash with the summer that might. And that's maybe not quite the case in some of the subcontinental markets. And also just that it's also that if you're hiring the best people, whether it be producers, whether it be directors, whether it be camera operators, whatever, they're also bringing probably the best habits from other sports across. So I'm pretty sure I'm right with this. A lot of India's camera people for test matches, and I don't know if they do the IPL, but I certainly know they do the test matches, traditionally were South Africans.
Same story over here, actually. There are a lot of foreigners in Pakistan that I see doing the camera work.
Is it South Africans, though?
I feel like it's South Africans.
So there was something to do, and someone explained this to me once. Mel Farrell might have explained it to me, but it was something to do with they came over early on when South Africa started touring these places, and then they've just kept up their contracts. And if you look at South African TV coverage, it is a step below Australia and England again. So I don't know. I'm just guessing with all these things, but I do think that the air. I mean, you go to the UAE or somewhere, you try and look a long distance, and everything always looks a bit hazier. Whereas you go to England and you look a long distance, everything looks clearer. Like something to do with the stand, the dust, the air quality. I don't know what it is, but
that's not the case in, like, let's say Gaul. You feel like Gaul's quality is better. I don't know. It's like maybe the ground and the aesthetics have to do something with this as well.
That's what I mean. I would assume it's different from ground to ground, because Dharmashala shouldn't be like that, right? It shouldn't.
And like,
they have clean air.
What sort of broadcast quality you have at the Newlands, it's still going to be good viewing, right? That sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think, but yeah, that would make sense again. And there are probably grounds in some of these places that don't look as good either. Do you know what I mean?
There's a Crick Picks over here in this best grounds ever.
Best grounds ever. I did that ages ago, and Gaul won the best, most iconic cricket grounds on a thing. So and that I did a Twitter poll. It ended up in Sri Lankan newspapers. I was like, oh wow, this is a slow news week.
Anyway, I think we've spent enough time on this. Just to kind of finish up on New Zealand versus South Africa, there's not much to write home about with respect to South Africa. Shukri Conrad mentioned it or talked about it like it's like Burnley playing at Anfield, and Burnley is a shit team in the Premier League, and Anfield is where Liverpool play. So just for context. But yeah, there was one batter who was able to cross 50 once across 2 innings. Everyone else failed. David Bedingham, who also happens to be one of 2 players who was playing versus India a month or 2 back.
He's a proper player.
He scored 87, and I was checking out his first class average. It's 49. And he's played in England, for Durham. He's played in South Africa. This guy's been around. He could be here to stay, in both the first team and whatever this team is.
No, he's definitely. I think I might have done some stuff on him when they won the test. When must have been the first test against India, because he's a really interesting player and very solid, knows what he's doing. So I don't know if you can go back and find some of that. I'm sure we did something there.
I think it was part of a scoreboard.
Yeah, I think it was on one of the scoreboard shows. But there was, I can't remember who it was, but the guy was batting first or second drop when he came out to bat in the second innings on what was a fairly flat wicket at that point. The run line on that the betting agencies had for him was like whether he was going to score, I think it was 12 or 13 runs. And it was just like no one believed in these guys. And the Burnley thing that you were talking about before, it's just unfair, right? It really,
especially coming from your coach. He shouldn't be saying that, right? I mean,
well, no, but everyone knows the situation they're in, right? Like, there's no way. There should be a couple of players out there who were thinking, "This is my big chance," right? And we saw that when West Indies put up a strike, 11, right? Sometimes it is your big chance, but for most people, this is it. This is the only time you're going to play for your country, and do what you can with it. But let's be honest here, you are going to go back and teach at a school very shortly.
Yeah, hopefully one of those guys, maybe Neil Brand, took a six for and opens the batting. Maybe he could be the future Elgar. But I mean, this is going to be tough, really, really tough. But anyway, we still have another segment to talk about. So let's go over that quickly and then wrap up.
How the hell do we have another segment? What are we doing here?
Because Australia lost again. The women lost once again. They won both the ODI and T20 series, but they had never lost a game of cricket to South Africa. First, they lost to T20. And then Marizan Kapp, she basically, obliterated Australia single-handedly in an ODI. She took 3 for 12 and scored 75. And it's crazy. She also scored more 50s on this tour, by the way. I think she got 3 in 6 games overall. And it's crazy how all of her friends, or most of her friends and her wife, do not play anymore. And she's still killing it at the highest level.
No, she's phenomenal. So we don't need another thing. We'll just do it here. I tell you what, we don't need to go too deep into this because me and Estelle just did a Red Inca podcast. Which is about the Australian women and everything else. So I don't want to say, and I just spent an hour talking to Estelle about this, so I don't want to go too much into detail of it. But the Australian losing is interesting, and I talked to Hypercourse and to Estelle and sent some messages to some friends who coach in women's cricket and everything. I think it's very fascinating. But we do see, Marizan played that game. We saw Hayley Matthews play an incredible game against the Australian women and beat them whenever that was as well. I wonder how much this is kind of like what Harmanpreet did, or how much this is Australia doesn't quite have the sixth gear that they once had, and so teams can hang with them a little bit more. But I'll tell you one stat: T20 cricket, they have won 7 of their last 12 games, so they've won 7 and lost 5. And before that, I think their win record was 75%. So they have dropped quite significantly of recent times. And, no one's surprised that Marizan Kapp would do that. But as you said, probably not the strongest South African team, at least that they could put out, because they've probably got some pretty good players who could walk into this side.
Think about the T20 World Cup final, right? Not too long ago, and Australia won there. And all of a sudden, they've lost 2 out of 6 games across formats to South Africa. And, if this was the Pakistan men's team, they'd be like, oh, Alyssa has won both the series, but we're not used to losing. So if she's lost 2 games out of 6, maybe replace her with Beth Mooney as captain, because Beth Mooney is scoring 50 after 50 after 50. But hopefully that's not the case in Australia. Do you think she's under pressure?
No. I think if she loses the World Cup, that would be very different. But I wouldn't think that she would be under pressure at the moment. Honestly, without wanting to go too much into the Red Inca episode, I think they kind of overperformed between 2018 and 2022. And that there should be some regression from individual players and as a team. And if you lose Meg Lanning, you're also losing like a key part of what your side was. Matthew Mott, obviously not coaching them as well. I think Estelle called it a transitional phase. Doesn't necessarily mean they're about to drop off the map. And, I think they've won 10 of the last 13 ODIs. So it's not horrendous, but there were whole years when they didn't lose ODIs, right? So there is certainly something going on there. And I think there's a lot of different issues and things to be talking about. But just from the South African point of view, the fact that the fact that South Africa are playing, it's been a weird series because haven't they been hammered in some games and then won others?
Yep.
So it's been a bit of a up and down series. But
They won the game in which Alana King did not destroy them, because in the other two ODIs, she took 3 and 4 wickets, and some of those deliveries. I actually think that out of all the leg spinners across genders who are playing right now, Alana King might be the most aesthetically pleasing to watch. There are some absolute
thinking about that for quite a while
jaffers.
now. That's an interesting one. But no,
But basically, when she didn't do well, they won.
Yeah. I think that's new South African team maybe has a lower floor at times. I can see how it could go completely wrong for them in a way that the old South African team was maybe a little bit more steady. But I do think that there's something there that could really, really develop quite interestingly going ahead. But good on them again. But yeah, Red Inca, it may not come out this week, it may come out in a couple of weeks, but we've gone into it only because you and I have been talking about it so much. I just wanted to stop and talk about it. But yeah, fascinating that they lost again. They were the Invincibles and now they're the Vincibles.
Yeah. Let's see how they perform in the next ICC tournament. But anyway, on that note, look forward to that Red Inca by Jared. But that's going to be it for this episode of Overthrows. If you liked it, like this video or, Spotify stream or whatever you're listening to, share it with your friends and subscribe to both this channel and Jared's other channel on YouTube. We'll be back with another episode of Overthrows next week. That'll be all for this time. Goodbye. And for those who are with us on YouTube, stay tuned because we're just going to start Uncovered after this short break. So yeah, you're still with Behram and Jared. We'll be back with Uncovered right after this short break.
If you have always wanted to turn your passion for sports into a career, well, I have the course for you. Fans with Laptops is the multimedia course that I came up with after millions of reads, views, and listens to all my work. It's designed for anyone to use their own fandom to get better at making content on the sport they love. Go to Fans with Laptops today. If me talking live about cricket is not enough, we also have an entire channel dedicated to the best stories in cricket called Good Areas. Find out what matchups really mean, understand the logic behind baseball, and look at the most important selection in the history of cricket of Basil D'Oliveira. Come and visit us a couple of times a week on the Good Areas channel for a new video.
Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Uncovered podcast. I'm your host, Behram Qazi, who you can find at deafmango on Twitter. And with me, as always, is Jared Kimber, who you can find absolutely everywhere. Lots of off-field cricket stuff, but what will dominate the discourse today, Jared, is, of course, the India and England series. It didn't feature on Overthrows because no cricket happened between them in the last week. But Virat Kohli is now unavailable for the remainder of the series. Originally, he was out for the first 2 tests, but now he won't be featuring at all. And AB de Villiers actually kind of gave some people some misinformation, or we don't actually know what that information is. But he basically said that Virat is expecting and then retracted his statement and said it was completely false. So all we can say is that hopefully there's nothing wrong and Virat is well. And yeah, that's still a big blow to India, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's a big blow to the series, right?
Yeah.
I know we get a lot of cricket and 5 minutes later there'll be an IPL and we'll forget about it. Then there's a World Cup. But, it's a major test series. It started brilliantly, great pitches, interesting cricket, baseball, the whole thing. You want Virat to be involved in it. Virat ups everything. I mean, I don't know if the ratings are down, but certainly from a social media point of view, Virat gets everyone fired. So it's a shame. And also, he's not playing. He would rather be playing than, going through with whatever he's going through at the moment. So, thoughts are with him and Harry Brook and hoping that they can, overcome their issues.
Definitely, thoughts are with Virat and fingers crossed here's to just hoping everything's fine. We do have a super chat before we can go on to all the other stuff that we have on our itinerary. Let's take Sankalp Verma's question, who is asking, how much is the complacency that you mentioned with broadcasting point with the BCCI the problem with Indian cricket in general? Watching a match at the stadium is just horrible experience, yet they're full. I mean, it's a cricket bad country. It's a religion in that country. So they maybe even kind of take that for granted, I feel.
Yeah, I think if you're not, if you, as a cricket board, you're not actually being tested by anyone, why would you get any better? And if you want to look at that, look how slow cricket developed, Sankalp, before free market capitalism came in, right? Yeah. There was no, whoever ran cricket just ran it the way they wanted. There's a great conversation. I can't remember the full details, but in New Zealand, they had like an elephant come out onto the ground or something during the 92 World Cup. And the other cricket boards were like, why are you doing this? And New Zealand were like, well, we want to give a really fun experience to people who come to the ground. It hadn't occurred to other cricket boards to try and make going to a cricket ground a fun experience, right? The cricket is there. You will enjoy the cricket, or you will go home and you'll be disappointed. So I think that there's always been an element of that in cricket, and certainly within Indian cricket, that is a problem. My guess is, I don't think I've ever been to another sporting event in India, but I've been to a football match in Sri Lanka, and I can tell you the cricket stadium's better than the football stadium. So, do you know what I mean? Like, it is there. Until the crowd kind of rise up and complain, and that's probably not going to happen because you're going to get full houses anyway. So, look, it's an issue, but it is what it is, I suppose.
I don't think it's the problem, and broadcasting, for whatever it's worth, is still going to be watched by millions, regardless of how well you put it out or make that content. But in terms of viewing experience from the stadia, now I have a bunch of Indian friends who will retweet posts on Twitter in which I'll see someone who's bought a ticket to the game, and they have a giant pillar right in front of them, so they can't really watch the game. So I feel like India, ever since the IPL boom, they invested all of this money into infrastructure, but they did not kind of think from the perspective of a fan whilst building those stadiums, and where a seat would make sense, where a seat would not make sense.
Yeah, I would say outside of England and Australia, maybe New Zealand, although some of those grounds are so small that, but there's a lot of bad cricket stadiums that if you look at them, you're like, this design doesn't make sense, and how you're using the space, and the seats don't make sense, and there's no cover, there's no shade for what would need to have shade for us. If you're going to sit in the sun for 7 hours, you need some kind of shade, and just, there aren't enough toilets. I can't remember so many times in my life I've been to a cricket match where the queue for the women's toilet is like a kilometer long, right? And if you've got a woman that you go to cricket with regularly, that if there's a big crowd, if she says she's going to the toilet, you may not see her for a while, right? There are major issues, and I think cricket stadiums are behind. UK ones have slowly started to get better. I still don't think they are that brilliant, but they've certainly started to get a lot better. Australian stadiums are great, but they're not cricket stadiums. They're all sports stadiums, and they've got a lot more money.
And concert venues and stuff like that, right? They're huge.
So there is an element of that when it comes to the Australian stadiums being so good.
Their modern-day coliseums are what they are.
Yeah. So it is a little bit different, but yeah, I think it's a problem I travel around the world. Trust me, this is not an Indian issue. There's some shit stadiums in lots of places in the world. I tell you what, Pisara was holding test matches not that long ago. I love Pisara, but it's a stupid place to play a test match. It looked like a club ground.
I mean, this reminds me of a fun anecdote. It's somewhat related, not entirely related, but I was in England to watch the 2019 World Cup, and first game or second game, I can't remember, because I think Lord's was fairly easy to go to the toilet or whatever. But at Edgbaston, I think I went out and there was this massive queue. And I was like, holy shit, like, how am I ever going to get to pee? And the
holy
innings is
shit.
going to be done. Yeah, but then...
That was the problem. So many holy shits going on in there.
Here's the interesting. I saw one person go in and just come out. And I was like, hey, wait a second. How does the line exist or queue exist? And this guy just went in and out. I went inside, and because it was a Pakistan game, no one was using the wall urinal. So I used the wall urinal, and I was like, oh, hell yes. And that was also a similar experience at the bar, Jared, in all Pakistan games. Let's just say Pakistan versus Afghanistan was a great day for Behram. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know it sounds silly, but just to go back to that question, when you talk to cricket officials, there are things where they still kind of get wrong at some of those grounds. So I can't remember which one it was, but I was talking to someone from the ICC, and I can't remember which World Cup it was I was at, but they'd ordered just a bunch of alcohol for a game that was like Afghanistan versus Pakistan or Bangladesh versus Pakistan or something, right? And, you and I both know that there are Western kids, and sometimes not even Western kids from those countries who go outside and they're like, now I can drink, my parents can't stop me, right? But there's a big difference between that and people who drink all the time and naturally drink at those grounds. So, those sorts of things happen all the time. So if they're getting that wrong, you can see why the stadiums aren't particularly right. But I would say that there isn't really someone who's known as a great, designer of stadiums. So, for instance, we know that Wankhede has been copied, once or twice, because it's probably one of the few really, not Wankhede, Wanderers. And that's why Wankhede is very similar to the Wanderers. Because we don't have many great cricket ground designs. The England designs don't make any sense. Don't get me wrong with
Headingley is terrible. Actually.
If you think Headingley's bad, Trent Bridge, they just cut off half the boundary because they wanted a bigger stand there, right? Like, there's so many weird things about English cricket design, right? And then Australian cricket design is essentially set up for these humongous crowds, which usually more often go to Aussie rules. So even in the grounds that get it right, it isn't always set up. So I do think there is a big issue with the way that cricket looks after its fans, but partly because there isn't an industry. If you think football stadiums, like if you're great at designing football stadiums in Brazil or, I don't know, Argentina or Africa, you're probably going to get bunches of jobs everywhere else around the world to be able to do that. Yeah. Whereas most cricket stadiums are probably developed by people who are not specialist cricket designing cricket stadiums.
I mean, we were sitting, it was the Pakistan-Afghanistan game in the 2019 World Cup at that refurbished new stand at Headingley. And it was just like so high up that we were like, it feels kind of weird watching cricket from this angle. So
no,
luckily
you're talking to the wrong person here. You can't say that to someone who grew up in the MCG because there ain't nothing high in Headingley compared to the MCG. I always take my friends when they come to me the first time to the very top of the MCG just to make them feel uncomfortable.
But, well, it kind of worked out for us because at Headingley, right next to the bar, which was empty in Pakistan, Afghanistan, they have a few chairs. So we kind of all just went and sat there. It was a great game. It was a nail-biter as well. But anyway, let's come back to the topic at hand, India's test team and all the things that are happening in it. Shreyas Iyer, Jared, has been sacked mid-series. He had recovered from his back spasms, and you would assume that they'd give him a longer rope, at least in home tests. I was quite surprised that they've kind of gotten rid of him, particularly with Kohli out injured and KL Rahul and Jadeja are still out injured. Kohli's out for other reasons, personal reasons, but Jadeja and Rahul are still unfit. Get rid of Iyer as well, and that's a lot of inexperience all of a sudden.
Yeah, I didn't quite get my head around this. I thought he batted okay at times in this series. Obviously, he hasn't made a lot of runs. Maybe they just feel that England's worked him out, and and there's no. But if you're not going to play him at home, doesn't that kind of mean that he won't play?
Anish is saying Iyer is injured as well. He's not, based on what I read.
I was going to say, I have heard rumors that he's injured, but all the places who are reporting it as he's been dropped. So that would mean to me, if that's, I would assume that they were told he was dropped. Otherwise, they wouldn't have reported that. But if he's injured, and this part of let's get back to the whole stadium thing. We don't always get told when players are injured anymore. And, I still remember Mitchell Johnson was rested from a test. And I had this ridiculous conversation with someone from Cricket Australia just going, was he rested? Was he dropped? Is he injured? And it was like a 30-minute conversation where at the end I said, if you can't answer this, what is the point of your existence? Right? Like, what is the point of being a spokesman for a cricket board if you can't tell me the actual reason he is not in the side? And the funny thing about that is Mitchell Johnson, I think they eventually came out and said he had been rotated, so rested. And the next test, Mitchell Johnson took a bunch of wickets and said he'd been dropped in the previous test. And you're like, what is happening here? I can't even get a straight answer. So it is really, really annoying when, there's no reason why at this day and age, we don't just have something on the BCCI website that just says, personal issues, leg injury, out for the next foreseeable future. I think the NBA and Premier League have things like probable and questionable for certain players. Just let us know. That's all. We still know they're going to lie, but at least we can report on something. And fans and betting fans and fantasy fans have and fans who buy the ticket who want to go and see a player have a bit more of an idea of what is actually happening.
Yeah. Plus, if it is in fact a case where he's been dropped, it doesn't make sense to me because you'd expect India to give him time. And in home tests especially, we all know how well he's done in first-class cricket. You can raise questions with respect to, Sena nations and batting over there, but we don't really know much apart from, South Africa. And it's really, really difficult to bat in South Africa because, as we've mentioned many times on the show, it's probably the hardest place to bat because of the bounce and the lateral movement. So the lack of faith, if that is the case in Shreyas Iyer, is a bit baffling to me. And, no Kohli. No KL, no Jadeja now, no Shreyas Iyer. In the middle, we thought that Bumrah might be rested, but now given that so many players aren't going to feature, I expect him to play in Rajkot. India are as weak as they could be, and this series is still up for grabs.
Yeah, I mean, for the series, it's great news. It's not great news if you like the best cricket, but from a, England have a real chance of stealing this third test, right? And if they do steal this third test, then it's on, right? It's a fantastic series from then on in. So, but yeah, from a basic wanting to watch good players play in their team, it's obviously been terrible so far. But yeah, I think it really opens up for England. I don't know if that makes me. I kind of felt eventually India would just work it out and play better cricket and win the series. The more injuries, the more you're just like, well, it's going to be really tough for them to do all those things, right? Like it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, and they've lost 2 batters here in KL and Shreyas, and they've brought in just one. Well, they had Rajat Patidar come in earlier, so I guess 2. But Devdutt Padikkal is in, and in the 6 first-class games he's played in 2024, he's got 747 runs at an average of 83. Now, there's that option. And then, of course, there's Sarfaraz Khan, who's also actually, what am I saying? The 3 batters that they brought in. So, yeah, Sarfaraz has been doing what Padikkal did in 6 games. He's been doing for 3 years or something.
For his entire life. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where they're at. And one of these guys is going to have to play. So is it going to be Sarfaraz or Padikkal?
I would have thought I thought it made more sense for Patidar to come in when KL wasn't there because they wanted a slightly older head, more mature, more understanding of his own game, even if he didn't have the same kind of ceiling. Whereas I think with Shreyas Iyer, you probably want someone to come in and flay the spinners and put some pressure back on England, and that makes sense that it's Sarfaraz. I would assume. Not that Padikkal's a bad player or anything like that, but my thought would be that you would go with Sarfaraz and give it a go from there.
Yeah, I would assume or hope that they do that because, KS Bharat might not be retained either in the 11. They might give a go to Dhruv Jurel.
Yeah.
I'm.
The thing is, if they make that change now, there's got so many changes that it's almost awkward. But I think that if they had no injuries and Virat had come back, they probably would have just made that change. Whereas now they might be thinking to themselves, do we really want to make another one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you've already got Shami out as well. Let's not forget that, right? This is bad news for sure. And I totally get that.
I remember once, I can't remember who it was, but there was that coach that I was interviewing about something, and I'd asked him why they hadn't made a change with a player when clearly they knew that this player wasn't going to come back. And he said, well, we had 3 injuries from that game, so we had 3 enforced changes, and we just thought making 4 changes would destabilize the side even further. And coaches and selectors do think about things like that.
Yeah, and too many changes, as you said, bringing in players who are going to be debuting. That is definitely a cause for concern because this is a huge series. It's a marquee series. And if India lose this, well, the Baz ballers will never shut up about it. So there's that entire thing over there, which honestly will be interesting. I love to see how the articles are written if that happens because it's going to be a field day for journalists, which, I mean, I would look forward to because who doesn't love Baz ball, right? As much as dogmatic as it may be. But anyway, before I end this segment, I actually want to talk about an origin story, Jared. We did an entire Footmarks podcast on this. And this one is eerily similar to that of Mukesh Kumar. Right arm pacer Akash Deep, not Akash Shallow, has been called into India's squad. And he was the best performing pacer versus the England Lions. That has kind of catapulted him right at the forefront. And he's going to potentially play a game for India now. This is someone who has 104 first-class wickets in 30 games at an average of less than 24. So that's quite impressive. He's also 27 years old, so he's in his peak years. He's also from Bihar, like Mukesh, and he also, his father wanted him to become a police officer. Similar story to Mukesh over there. So if there's someone in the comments who belongs to Bihar, can you tell us is that the only things you guys do?
Did he fail the fitness test, though? That's what we really need to know. Well, if there's someone from Bihar, we need to know what the fitness test is for a police officer there, and how how a professional athlete might have failed it. I think that's the most important thing. I talked to some of the some people around England Lions. They were quite impressed with him. I don't know if he's going to come in and cause any major issues for the major team, for the senior team, but people people I talked to thought he was okay. So it'll be interesting. I don't expect him to play, but who knows? I mean,
Well,
I didn't expect most things in this series so far.
I did a bit of research on him, and the in-swinger is a stock delivery, but he might need to develop some more skills in order to survive, especially in home tests in India. But his story is actually quite inspiring. So, unlike Mukesh, he didn't fail the fitness test. He purposely failed the tests to become a police officer because he wanted to become a cricketer. And his father was like, no, like every brown parent, he was like, you've got to go study and do these things, and cricket has no future, and this is Bihar, not Mumbai. But anyway, it got tragic because he lost his father and brother within the space of 6 months.
Oh.
So then he went on to play tennis ball cricket for money. And he had 2 younger sisters to take care of. And after all of that, hard work and toil, he's actually in here with an opportunity to debut for India. So,
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite a story. And I hope that if he gets that opportunity, he can make something of it.
Oh, just to go back too. So I've said a couple of times recently that some of the Indian players play tape ball cricket, and Indians are like, actually, we don't play tape ball cricket.
That's why I said tennis ball this time.
Well, but they're not always tennis balls either, right? This is why I use tape ball, because tape ball is the generic term that is used all around the world. There are hard balls, hard rubber balls that are used. There are normal tennis balls that are taped up. And then there are these like specialist rubber balls that are made. I'm not going to... Every different cricket culture has a slightly different version of it. In some cricket cultures, in Australia, we use tape balls and we use rubber balls at times, the harder, heavier tennis balls at times. I'm not going to stop every single time and say, when we say tape ball, we know what we mean. What we mean is it wasn't a cricket ball. It was some kind of ball that was made so that you can modify it a little bit and make it act like a cricket ball without it being a cricket ball. That's essentially what we mean. That's the last time I'm ever going to say it, because if I say tape ball, just understand what I'm talking about is a rubber ball of some kind that was used. Obviously in Bihar, this is a huge thing.
Yeah. But at least 5 different people came to me in my DMs and on Twitter, like comments, on YouTube comments. There were so many people. Exactly on our Discord. There was this guy on our Discord who tagged us in that as well, right? We don't use tape balls over there. And I was like,
it's exactly the same thing if I talk about artificial pitches and I call them matting pitches, I'll get the same thing from Australians and New Zealanders. Go, actually, we use Astro. I'm like, I know, dude. I grew up on Astro wickets, but most people in the world don't have AstroTurf wickets. They have matting wickets, which are slightly different, but essentially still the same thing. This is a podcast for global listeners, right? So in most places, we call the big white floppy hat, the Mitali Raj one behind my head here, it's called a floppy hat. In England, they use that sort of Jack Russell style hat is what they call a floppy hat, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere has slightly different names for different things. I'm generally going to default to the one that is most widely known so that I don't have to have conversations like this ever again in my life.
Yeah, so all of you guys should know that that's what Jared is using tape ball as a
metaphor for
umbrella.
life.
Yeah, umbrella term or metaphor for life or whatever. But on that note, let's take a break. You're watching Uncovered with Jared and Behram, and we have lots more to talk about, so stay tuned, and we'll be back after this short break.
Occasionally, I also talk about behind-the-scenes stuff. A huge thanks to everyone who has supported us on Patreon and helped us build this channel. Join our Patreon community and unlock exclusive benefits. Enjoy AMAs, live calls with me, and connect with fellow cricket enthusiasts on Discord. Express your cricket fandom with Bodyline t-shirts. Discover their extensive range of player-inspired tees, featuring cricket legends such as Murali, Warne, and Wasim. With team-themed designs and options for hardcore cricket nerds, they've got you covered no matter what your interest in cricket is.
Welcome back to Uncovered, you with Jared and Behram, and we spoke about India's team news in the first segment. Let's come to England, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we've been informed that Jack Leach has been ruled out of the series. He did get injured in the first test, did not feature in the second. And, you know, I sometimes feel for Jack Leach because this is someone who's been battling with his body his entire life. And he's remarkably gotten over 100 wickets for England in Test cricket. And here he is yet again, you know, missing out on a tour where you'd expect him to do well, right? That's the sad part over here. It's not an England series. Like, it's not a series in England. It's a series in India.
Well, also, like, he got banged on the knee twice. And, like, his leg, clearly something happened because it blew up like a balloon, that leg, right? But you look at, when a situation like that happens, it's like, of course, Jack Leach gets hit twice and then can't play another test in the one series he's been working his way back towards playing. As you said, it's very sad. There's Crohn's disease. He got really, really sick in South Africa a couple of years ago. Most finger spinners don't get stress fractures in their back. He got one of those. It's just always something for him. And I think before he got injured, that year before, that sort of first year of Bazball, is the best he'd ever bowled, right? I thought before that, he was an okay bowler, a good bowler in some Asian conditions, but not particularly a fantastic bowler outside of that. And that year, I thought he really developed quite well. He also concussed himself fielding. God, my God, if we go through his injuries, it's horrendous. But
the only good thing that has happened to him is that he landed a lifetime deal with Specsavers after that Ashes knock at Headingley.
Yeah, but why does he have that deal? Because he needs glasses. Think about it. It's really, really sad when you go back through all the things that Jack Leach has had to overcome. And this is, as you said, this is what he's really his main skill is, and he's not going to be able to do it again. And just hoping for him that he gets a good run of forget not being injured, just a good run of health is what that man needs, right? Just a couple of years where he doesn't have to worry about something. I've got Crohn's disease. Well, that's pretty bad. Oh, I just broke my back. Let's just have a period where he doesn't have to see a doctor for like 6 months.
Yeah, let's knock on wood and hope that's the case for Jack Leach whenever he returns from injury. I was really impressed with him when England toured Pakistan. I thought he was phenomenal. So I expected him to have a good series versus India, but unfortunately things have gone south. Things could have gone even more south for England, Jared.
Souther.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, Souther. When they were returning from Abu Dhabi after their week-long vacation, or whatever you'd like to call it, Rehan Ahmed apparently had a single entry visa to India, so they were about to have even more visa trouble. Luckily for Rehan, it was sorted and they gave him like a 2-day entry visa, and then the paperwork for the rest was going to be done later, so we didn't have more drama. But at this point, England really are shitting themselves with respect to this visa stuff.
What did I tell you when this issue came up the first time? What does cricket need? Specialists who work in visas, right? Imagine having a player with a single entry visa and then leaving the country. So if you have an expert whose job it is to know about the visas, that person is probably going to say to you, whoa, you're leaving the country. Has everyone got a visa that says they can come back? Right? Because that's what visa experts do. What visa experts...
Rehan and Shoaib Bashir back in India to play mini golf or something. It's not like they had anything to do in Abu Dhabi in the first place.
So it's just, for me, it's just such a stupid... I'll say this again. Just someone set up a friggin' LinkedIn profile saying that you are the world's leader in getting visas for cricketers, because this is the most untapped market I've ever seen in my life, and it's incredible how often it happens. And the funny thing is, these stories, Usman Khawaja and Shoaib Bashir, Rehan Ahmed, and Pakistani writers and Indian writers trying to go to Pakistan and all sorts. These things come up. As I said, it's much worse in the T20 leagues. These things happen all the time. Players turn up to airports and get sent home. Player gets announced, and then 4 days later, another player gets announced. It's almost always a visa issue, right? There's only two things that it is: a knock, right? A no objection certificate, or a visa issue. It just happens so much. We just need someone who actually knows what the hell they're doing, helping these friggin' organizations, because that was just, stupidity personified there of like how that ended up happening.
Yeah, at least with the Shoaib Bashir incident, you had that whole case of how they applied in, start of December, like 11th December, and then a lot of people had their visas before Christmas, and then Shoaib Bashir still did not have his by the end of it, and then there was this small technicality where England had to ensure that he went to the consulate in London, the Indian consulate, and that's where he had to get some stamp. I get that whole argument that you've made it unnecessarily hard, and I had like some sort of sympathy for Shoaib Bashir over there, and I thought India was perhaps more at fault over there than England. But over here, it's purely England. If you know that Rehan Ahmed, who is also someone of Pakistan origin, has a single entry visa, you don't go to Abu Dhabi to have a piss up. I don't know.
Also, maybe this is just... I can't imagine ever wanting to spend time in UAE voluntarily. I don't understand why people go. This is just my personal view. I don't get it. Do you know what has lots of nice beaches? and places for you to buy alcohol? India.
Sri Lanka? Oh, India,
Well,
yeah, of course.
you could go to Sri Lanka as well if you want to. Like, again, I would say that is a nice. Like, I get they probably wanted a 7-star hotel and to play golf and all that sort of stuff. But it's like,
they might be wary of the Indian media because we know what they were doing in Abu Dhabi, right? So they don't want negative press either.
maybe. I mean, you might be right. I don't know. Anyway, the whole thing is not ideal.
I blame
It's very cricket, this whole situation.
Yeah. I'm going to blame the marketing people in Goa that you guys did not do a good enough job for England to be persuaded to come to Goa as opposed to Abu Dhabi. Because Abu Dhabi isn't even the main place in the UAE. People go to Dubai.
I can't believe you said Goa when you meant Pondicherry, but that's fine. You know, those are available too. Kerala, lovely. Great seafood in Kerala as well.
Lovely people as well. I've met some Keralites in my life. I obviously have never been to India.
Could have hung out with Srisanth.
Yeah, who knows? He could have.
Okay, not ideal. Not ideal. I'll cut that one out.
I could have gone to Pondicherry and hung out with our producer Muku.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, there's heaps of great. I just think India's a great place, and I do think sometimes cricketers, they're so desperate to get back out of it, and it's and I get it if you're in a major city, but if for those of us who've been lucky enough to travel around India, you get outside of some of those major cities, and it's incredible. Right? Like, and I understand that, you know, every player comes from a different background. Some of them feel claustrophobic and as you said, the media and all those things. But there are some beautiful parts of India as well. And it does feel to me that, like, so many cricketers in the world are so happy to go to India and make money and talk really nice things about it. And then every time they have a holiday anywhere but India, right? and it's, you know, I don't know. It doesn't always sit right with me. I'm not having a go at the England team because, as you said, it might have just been that. It could just been that it's better golfing in Abu Dhabi or UAE or Dubai, wherever they were going to. I don't know. I think golf should be banned as well.
Yeah, at least with respect to like cricketers, because we've had enough golfing injuries and football injuries. You just play cricket. Get injured while playing cricket or something. Anyway, there is one last topic on Uncovered today, and that is Shamar Joseph. After the success that he had in his debut test series in Australia, won the Player of the Series award. The obvious has happened, Jared. First, the PSL kind of roped him in. Peshawar Zalmi will have his services in the upcoming PSL. And now he's actually landed a $360,000 contract with the Lucknow Super Giants as the Mark Wood replacement. So, we all feared it. It's happening rather soon. And Shamar Joseph has already been roped in by those franchises.
Yeah, it's funny because you're right. There is a sense of fear of, oh no, it's happening again. Shamar Joseph just solidified his family's future.
Yeah. Barakara will have more jobs other than wood logging now.
Do you know what? And we never do that. We never do the right. We never go. Everyone's like, oh, it's ruining international cricket. Yeah, but his family, they're going to have a really good future, right? Because
they're not going to make doors and windows out of that wood.
and if he
a factory.
And if he goes on to make even more money in those leagues, he'll make, it could be generational wealth that we're talking about, especially in a country like Guyana, which I mean, I've been to Guyana, but I would assume the cost of living is much lower than certainly on some of the islands, which can be quite expensive at times. But
I mean, 360 grand is still a lot of money, even for us.
You know what I mean?
It's immense.
It's certainly a lot of money for me.
I mean, if I get 360,
I know you're a finance bro, so you're pissing money out.
I would take a decade off if I have that kind of money.
So no, I just think it's I think we have to always remember that. But yes, look, this is what happens. You play really good cricket at the international level now, and you're going to get offers straight away. And just hoping he continues to play for the West Indies, obviously, because, I don't want West Indies to lose another player, but also want to make sure that he makes the most from his incredible talent, right? That almost went overlooked. He almost became a security guard. And, I've been a security guard and I'm a failed cricketer. I think I would have preferred to be a professional cricketer if I had the chance and, to be able to live your dream and do what he's doing. Also shows you now how, if you're an IPL franchise and a PSL franchise, but more so the IPL because it's a more professional, higher octane league, do you really need to see him play good in a test match before you think he's worthy of being brought in? Like,
I was going to come to that because he's only played 2 professional T20 games, right? So
So-
what is the data over here that you've gone for?
I would assume that he's never done a trial with an IPL team. So I know people like, Obed McCoy and what's his name, Odean Smith. Probably there's a whole bunch of that generation through to now. Chima Holder, I think, was another one who got trials, were flown over to have trials when they were quite young. Just bowling the nets. Just what does this guy do? We want to see it up close rather than just on video, and have our coaches with him and all that sort of stuff. That's what scouting is. It feels a little bit more like scouting shouldn't be this man has taken a bunch of wickets in a test match, because everyone can see that, right? It should, if you're waiting to scout a player when they play under 19 cricket or play in a test match, your scouting system is wrong. You should be knowing beforehand. Like, is he better than he was a month ago? Right now? Probably not. I don't think he's developed all that much in the last month. So I do think there's an issue from that perspective. But and as you said, there's no data. They're going on vibes. That's okay. I mean, when
I'm
you
happy
go on
for
vibe,
him.
yeah. Well, when you go on vibes, you're going to make more mistakes than you are if you don't go on vibes. But the point is that there is actually ways of doing. He has actually played cricket before. You can fly him out to places. Teams do this in the IPL, right? South African and West Indians especially quite often get trial sessions and play with teams and everything else. So from that point of view, again, cricket just needs to mature and grow up and everything else. But fantastic for him and good on him.
Yeah. Very, very happy for him. And it's interesting. He is 24 years of age, so he could develop. But if I'm scouting, as you said, a T20 bowler, I'm probably looking for variation. I'm looking for different types of deliveries. Does he have a knuckleball? How good is his slower one? Can he bowl a decent Yorker? What is his back of the length stuff like? Shamar Joseph had success in Australia bowling a channel.
He did bowl some good Yorkers, so I suppose we've seen that, haven't we? I mean, he's
the Travis
replacing...
Head one.
Yeah.
The Travis Head Yorker was really good.
He's replacing Mark Wood?
Yes.
Well, Mark Wood doesn't have half those things that you just said either. Do you know what I mean?
Mark Wood is like 155, right?
That's what I was going to say. So if you looked around the world and you went, there isn't another bowler of roughly this pace, but Shamar Joseph is slightly slower. Again, I don't have a problem with that. But the problem at this stage in the IPL, and look, maybe this is unfair because it still happens in the Premier League and the NBA and Major League Baseball and everything. But at this stage in the IPL, I don't think it should be a situation of, he did really well in that game I saw last week, let's get him in. It should be all the other stuff, right? Like, you should know all the deliveries that he can bowl before he gets off the plane, and you give him, $300,000. Like, you just should. Maybe they do, but the fact that it's just happened now would suggest to me that they probably don't, and he played a good test match and everyone got excited. And look, owners do that. It's a big part of dealing with owners, don't get me wrong, but
with Peshawar Zalmi, I can see how it kind of could have materialized because Darren Sammy is affiliated with that team, right? So
it's an
Sammy
interesting
is
one,
a
though.
vibes guy.
Of all the places that, and Sammy should know more about him as well, which does help. But of all the places where you can find someone who bowls 88 to 92 miles an hour, like I would have thought, who are raw and untrained. Pakistan, is that potentially a place? So from my perspective, I do think to myself, I don't know. But look, as I said, I do think he's very talented. I'd love to see how he's going to bowl in different formats as well. And he's fun and exciting, and he's got a great story. So let's hope he let's say he's terrible at T20. Let's hope he makes as much money out of it as possible before anyone ever works that out.
Or he could try and fail in the PSL and learn enough things by the time he goes to Lucknow to do fairly well over there, and then get to play for Durban as well. So now he's playing for all the super giants, right? That could be his career arc. But what I'm most happy about is that I was reading the piece that Bharat wrote, and he mentioned how Shamar Joseph prior to Australia had only left his country once to South Africa. And South Africa is an interesting place to go for a black person, let's be honest. And he had only ever left his village of Barracara before that, prior to moving to New Amsterdam in Guyana. And then he went to Australia, and that was he was really interested, and his world was like, his horizons were being broadened. Now he's going to come to Pakistan and India. So that kid is going to have even a bigger broadening of horizons. And that's what makes our sport beautiful, I think.
Do you know what he needs? Help with his visas.
Well, that is pretty much the perfect note to end this episode of Uncovered. And if you enjoyed it, guys, please give us a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to both this channel and Jared's other YouTube channel. We'll be back with another episode of Uncovered for you next week. For now, that is all. Goodbye.
If you watch this channel, you'll love us on Main, where we do deep dives into the greatest cricket stories every week at Good Areas. How did Virat Kohli play that shot? What is so weird about Neil Wagner? And explaining the incredible misery of being a New Zealand opening batter. Visit our Good Areas site today. Want to show the world that you not only love cricket, but that you know the game deeply? Well, you need a Bodyline t-shirt. In fact, at Bodyline t-shirts, you can actually buy a t-shirt about Bodyline, but also tees inspired by the greatest players in our game. Head to Bodyline t-shirts today.